Onion Cycles podcast is about thought-provoking, emotion-evoking, action-driven, step-by-step guidance to explore the unique, glorious, and wonderful ocean of your being. Because healing is a multi-layered process of getting to know oneself. Become the self-empowered empiric researcher by discovering the unique layers of your existence. With your host, Nadine Alma, welcome to the Holistic Healing Hub. Welcome to the Onion Cycles podcast. In the tumultuous time immediately after Christ's crucifixion, Christianity is seen as a forbidden religion. It's illegal to be Christian. Yet this crazy devoted man named Paul is traveling from village to village telling stories about his experience of Christ. He happens to stop in a small village where a 17-year-old named Thecla lives. She can hear Paul from her bedroom window and she's riveted. She remains at her window for 3 days and 3 nights as Paul recounts his misadventures with Christ. Something begins to unravel for her, or something that had always existed within her suddenly raises to the surface, and in those 3 days her life is transformed. Her fiancé begs her to come away from the window. He tells her that she should be ashamed for directing her love away from him. He reminds her of her duty of the law, and he enlists her mother, who begs for her to return to them as well. But Thecla remains, and even more, she begins to want to meet Paul and to live the life that had been expected of her for a life she now feels is authentically her own. Her fiancé reports Paul to the governor, calling him a magician, attributing him with the powers to persuade young women not to marry. The governor has Paul arrested and sent to jail. Thecla leaves her house in the middle of the night to go to see him. She gives her bracelets to the prison gatekeeper's admission and he lets her in. She gives an ornate mirror to the guard at the cell door, easily discarding the remnants of her old life. He lets her in as well. Then she goes to Paul and sits at his feet. The next day, word gets out that Thecla had been to the prison to see Paul. Her fiancé is beyond outrage. Thecla is his. She is his possession. Thecla's mother agrees and screams for her punishment. Her own mother suggests that she is burned at the stake for breaking the law of her betrothal, for going her own way, for following her fiery young heart. The governor has Paul whipped and thrown out of town, but to teach a lesson he has Thecla stripped and binds her body to the stake. The pyre is lit. I've always imagined that she was visibly trembling, but that her resolve comes from a place within her, and it gives her this courage that reminds her of who she is, of what she's capable of. Just as the flames are beginning to reach her, Thecla makes the sign of the cross, and a sudden thundercloud covers her and all the spectators. Rain pours down onto the fire that was meant to take her life, and she is saved. She has saved herself. This story comes from one of the earliest Christian scriptures that has ever been found. It's titled The Acts of Paul and Thecla. Scholars know that it was widely read because so many copies have been recovered. But in the late 2nd century, an early Christian leader and theologian named Tertullian condemned this scripture because it implied that women had the spiritual authority to lead communities and to baptize. The scripture ends by relating that Thecla healed many, that her ministry lasted until she died at the ripe old age of 90, and that she's buried supposedly right near Paul. I think the most threatening aspect of Thecla's story is that she frees herself from any illusions that power resides outside of her. The Thecla who was to be married off, the Thecla from a prominent family with the weight of her mother's expectations, the girl who was bound by the law to become a wife and held no earthly right to follow the dictates. The call of something inside her. She died during those 3 days and nights when she refused to leave her window and the sound of Paul's voice. She began to move her own volition. She began to go against the expectations of a girl considered the inferior sex in her time. She began to do what her heart was telling her to do, and this was the sacrilege to those in power. That she refused to obey or validate any authority outside of her, even and ultimately Paul's. She baptized herself because she realized she could. She realized that all along within her she contained the power to save herself. And so she did. This extract is from Mary Magdalene Revealed by Meggan Watterson. I welcome you wholeheartedly with an open heart space into this space of healing, of self empiric research, of getting to know ourselves and having a place of vulnerability where we can be honest with ourselves in order to heal, to integrate, and to grow. Hello to all of you new there. Please, I am so happy to have you here. I want to mention the worksheet that is available for free download on my website www.wandfinder.org. This worksheet contains all the notes of every podcast episode we do, and it also helps us in the approach of as I think, so I feel, so I act, to evolve and get from the thinking through the feeling into a state of acting upon and aligning ourselves with whatever it is that we want to achieve in life. So it's action based, and I highly recommend you download it for free on my website. And with that said, let's look at what this story of Thekla tells us, because this is story 25, episode 26, the Being Human series, part 2, Desire. Additionally to Meggan Watterson, my source or one of my sources is, additionally to Meggan Watterson, a second source I used for this podcast episode is the YouTube video by Teal Swan called The Great Spiritual Conundrum. It is just over 20 minutes, and I highly recommend you checking it out if you feel that it resonates with you, feel drawn to do that. I will put the link into the description below. And with all of that said, let's dive straight in. Desire. Putting in front of us the two opposing belief systems that tackle the topic of desire, because we have one fraction that sees desire as a personal expansion to get what you need, what you want. If you know what you want, you are able to manifest that, and you align with what you want to manifest, and then you get what you want and you expand, and there's no more what you want after that. And the more you attain, the more you manifest, the more you're getting into that happiness that you are after, because desire comes from a place of wanting to be more fulfilled or more whole or getting back into wholeness. Then there's the other fraction that says the way to attain happiness through desire is by surrendering and basically not wanting for anything and letting go of the notion that there is anything outside of you that you actually need in order to fulfill desire or be happy. So basically, it's the one teaching us to be active and the other one teaching us to be inactive and passive. And I think that if we look on a grand scheme of things, of all that we've covered so far and all that is out there, with everything, it's a balance and it's also a work in progress. So I want to approach this topic of desire with the foundational pillar of knowing that neither one of those approaches is right and neither one of them is wrong. In fact, both of them have merit, but both can also evolve into physical, emotional pain. So we want to thrive by the complementary parts that each of those approaches provide for us and fuse them together. Being human means that we'll always have desire, right? So there's a longing nature within us, and I believe that longing nature is sort of this soul that wants to grow and wants to evolve. It is also based on ego. Ego is nothing to be afraid of, and ego is nothing to slay, if you want to think of it like that. On the contrary, ego is something that kept us alive, that keeps us alive still. Everything needs to be observed and everything needs to be treated with awareness and mindfulness to it. So the ego is one necessary part of our experience of this reality, right? So if we detach our misconceptions of what ego is and that we need to get rid of ego, we then can clearly see that we can discern between what is the intention between the desire that arises. So, in a moment that we become aware of, all right, I'm a work in progress, we are constantly in a work in progress, and there's a desire coming up, where does this desire come from? Does it come from an ego driven base, or does it come from a pure heart source? Like, why? Ask yourself the why. Why do I want this? There is a lovely video that I saw. It was a podcast by Mel Robbins, and she had a guest called Tara Swart. And Tara Swart is a neuroscientist, and she had a very beautiful approach to what I'm trying to say. Realizing that all along within her, like in the story of Thekla, she contained the power to save herself by just simply asking why. So you would sit down and take 5 times very deep breaths to calm your nervous system and get into the zone and the flow. And then you put both hands on your forehead and you ask yourself, is this what I really want and why? Logically. And then you write the answers down that come to mind. And then you would take another 5 very deep breaths. And you would put both hands on your heart and ask, is this what I really want and why? Emotionally, and write that down too. And lastly, you take another 5 times a very deep breath and you put both hands on your belly and ask, is this what I really want and why, intuitively? And then you'll see what your answers are, and you can discern where does this desire come from. And then there is this aspect next to go deeper and approach to closing this gap between the you and the conscious you, meaning that there is a you that has your name, and this you representing the ego and the personality that was shaped in this life and by the environment you lived in. Why does this one want this outcome? And then the conscious ego, the one that you're slowly getting to know, the one that you're establishing intuitively and evolving, and hopefully that is thriving within you throughout this journey of self-discovery. What does that ego say to your whys and to the whys that you have written out? Because there is a gap between manifestation and appreciation what is. And that brings me to the second, I think, most important point of desire, which is what we brushed on in the episode Joie de Vie, the joy of life. Because in our society, there's always this drive to happiness, this chase of happiness, this as a goal to attain, an end point, basically. We're forgetting that it's a journey, and it's not even a journey. I've come to sort of realize that it's who we've become while being on the journey. It's about like your choices during these experiences on this journey, because that is who we will become. So instead of making happiness and attaining the desire that came up and clinging to the outcome of that, making it conditional, this is how I want it to be, and if it's not like that, then I won't be happy. This serious attachment to an outcome, that is what's causing the emotional suffering. That's causing the pain. That is, I think, why people interpreted desire as something bad. Because only if we say that, oh, if I can't have this, then I'm unhappy, then I'm unfulfilled. If I'm not good enough to get this, and therefore it causes me pain because I don't feel worthy enough to attain the goal and to attain the desire. I'll never get this because it's too hard, it's too painful, it's too long. I can't feel good until I get this. All these external conditions put a huge strain on the pathway of getting to where you want. And it's actually also a part of resistance, because in making a statement like desire is something bad, we basically celebrate the fact that we don't need to grow or evolve. So we just say, oh, I'm not good enough. I don't need to address the emotions and the thoughts that make me feel that way. I don't need to go through them. I can just suppress them and repress them, get on with my life, stay in a comfort zone that makes me unhappy, rather than exploring the uncomfortable zone that might lead to expansion and growth and more happiness and fulfilling my desire. So, in a way, it's sort of like a coping mechanism to say, oh, if I get this, then I'm happy, because you'll always be on the chase and you'll always be on a struggle to get to where you want. And if in the course of this struggle you feed your belief systems that you're not worthy, or there's no self-love, or that there is no reason why you are so special to attain your goal or to reach your goal, then you can basically just give up and resist what negative emotions rise within you. So you don't have to work on yourself, right? So from that distinction between the two camps, of one saying you need to totally let go and not have desires, and the other one who's saying you need to be active and bring yourself into alignment with your desires, we have a result that basically is the middle camp that says, oh, well, if I get there, then I'll be happy. So I don't really need to like be active about it or overly active. And if anything goes wrong, I just say, well, I'm not worthy enough. And I feel like that is based on a third point I wanted to make, which is that control is an illusion. And that is why I believe both camps have a need to be understood as complementary. Both camps have to be understood as something that has to be practiced and has to be seen as a constant work in progress. Because same with the healing and integrating journey, it's getting to know yourself, it's getting to know why you have those desires, and it's getting to know why you might feel resistant to getting there. It's also getting to know what you could do to be in alignment with those desires. It's like a balance between getting moving and appreciating the now, if I would summarize it. So, you're trying to make a balance between getting what you desire and getting into a state of aligning yourself through actions and thoughts with what you desire, but also not make it a condition that you get to your goal or attain your goal in a certain way or at all, which means you surrender. You let go of not of the desire, but you let go of the outcome. Because ultimately, surrendering just means applying your free will of choosing how to react to life. So, if you block and resist the unwanted, but you're continually clinging and attaching yourself to the outcome, you basically need to step out and disidentify from what you thought is the way, and have a totally different approach of observing, like any emotion, like everything we talked about in the episode, the emotional body. Work through it, feel through it, think through it, whatever comes up and arises within you, and observe it. Don't attach yourself to it, and see it as something that is part of you, but something that isn't all of you, if that makes sense. So we cannot blame desire or build our happiness on top of desire, is the two main points I wanted to make in this podcast episode. Happiness comes from free will to release resistance, and problems will always be there, because problems essentially are the opposite of stagnancy. So problems are always there and the source of our growth, because if there weren't any challenges or hardships, we wouldn't grow. We'd just be all the time, and there wouldn't be any friction, and without friction there is no evolution, right? So stagnancy is contradicting the flow of life, therefore problems will always be. And that is when you need to approach the mindset that comes almost naturally, born out of the balance between surrendering and putting yourself and your actions in alignment with what your desire is. So the acceptance is a constant work in progress to choose free will, to celebrate the now, knowing that there is a gap between surrendering and letting go of your desire, but also having that desire as being something very innately human, and knowing that you can put your thoughts and your actions in alignment with whatever you want and whatever you desire. It's the detaching, however, from the control or the illusion that we control anything, really. Like, you plan something and it turns out totally different. How do you cope with that? How do you cope with these situations? And why do you react the way you react when something goes awry and when something goes in a different direction that you actually planned it to be? So the only certainty in life is change, and no matter the plan, the reaction of you to the outcome received teaches you a lot about what the state of your inner world is. And that is the key to freeing yourself from the pain that only arises when we put attachment to the outcome of our desires, or how this desire has to be brought about. This story of Thekla, then, and this story of how she frees herself and how she basically just goes with the flow and only listens to the intuitive voice in her heart, touched me deeply, because I see that her approach is exactly that balance between surrendering but also following through and bringing yourself in alignment. So her life went a certain way, something transformed her deeply, and the momentum that devotion that arises within her creates is that she suddenly, for the first time, probably hears herself, her intuitive voice, over all the chatter and all of the noise from the surrounding cultural aspects, societal expectations, from her family system. And she just knows, and she just devotes everything to getting closer and attaining her desire. Even if you let go, and if you say the only way is to surrender and let go, that is also a desire, right? So a wish is saying that there is a lack of this wish in my life. So instead of saying, oh, I am fulfilled and I'll just take the now, however it presents itself to me, I'll take actions in alignment with what I want, but I'm not attached to the outcome, because I know everything is already the way it's supposed to be and the way it's meant to be. I can do more and I want to do more, but I'm not attached to a lack within. I just had an idea, and that idea, that vision makes me happy, makes me filled with passion and with drive and with all the positive things that desire brings to our lives. Because that's, I feel like, what often is forgotten in this discussion about how we need to be more divine than human, how we need to get rid of desire, or how to be a slave to desire and work constantly on ourselves and on our lives to align ourselves so that we then can get the outcome that we so desire. There is no balance in both approaches. But if you see Thecla, and if you draw certain parallels to her story that could teach us how to get more into the balance act of acknowledging that it's always a free will to choose how we react, that we can take action because we have free will, but that tying our happiness to a desired outcome is what causes emotional suffering, and that by tying our desire to be a cause of pain in itself also causes suffering, because we are preaching ourselves that what we desire isn't worthy, and that we actually have a lack of what we desire, so we need to repress that. But Thecla does balance these two so beautifully, in the sense that she experiences a revelation, an epiphany. She suddenly knows her inner voice. And that is what we try to do in this podcast, right? We are halfway through our year, and all we do is try to be a self-empiric researcher to get to know ourselves, get to know where we have issues that are caused from other lifetimes, where we have issues that are caused from this lifetime, from growing up, where we can see clearly what is holding us back because it's just a belief system and we can reinvent that, but then also discover and uncover our natural desires and our natural talents that fulfill us, that make us happy, that make us unique, and that make us that special light bulb that is so needed in this world right now, to shine our light and to shine our perception, our point of view on this life, and give back, to be of service to an overall ascension and evolution of humankind, right? So that arises within Thecla, and then she has so much passion, so much devotion, so much expansion because of this desire, that every move forward she makes and every free will decision she has is in alignment with that desire. So I believe that is why this example of Thecla is such a beautiful one to read, because it states very clearly what the act of balance could look like. Again, this story is not an ultimate truth. It is not a patented recipe, and it shouldn't be understood that way. It should just be able to transport you to think about how you want your life story to be, because essentially life as it is a story about you. And every single podcast episode so far was trying to bring you closer to the essence of you, so that in the end you're able to tell a story about yourself and get to know yourself in the core, in the essence, with all the darkness, with all the pain, with all the anger, with all the wrath, with all the beauty, with all the divine, with all the lightness, with all the laughter, and with all the joy. That is the Being Human series. That is why this is so important to me to bring to the world, is because the contradiction or the paradox between being human and being divine isn't really a paradox. It's just that we, through constant seeking and constant content from all sides, and hustle and bustle from all sides, and opinions and perceptions, it's very hard to form our own. So in being a self-empiric researcher and seeing especially this second power of wrath, as Mary Magdalene calls it, desire, in a new perception, from a new point of view, that opens up a new chapter to get to know yourself better. Like, what does your desire say about you, and how do you approach your desire, and how do you want your life to look like, and how strong is that desire, and where does it lead you? And when you're done being constantly in the thought process of why, then you are able to answer yourself the question if it is truly from you or not, and how to go forward with it, and how to reach that balance between, right, this is my goal, this is the micro step to do list to get there, and what I can do to align myself in action, in thought, in feeling with it. But also, life is good as it is. Like, I'm safe. I have breath in my lungs, and I have maybe a car or public transport to go wherever I want. I have food in my cupboards. I have provided for my pets. I've had a good cuddle this morning. I like the rain this evening because now the air feels clear and fresh again. Or I love the sunrise right now because it gives me warmth and it gives me a fuzzy feeling in my stomach that it's going to be a nice day. Or whatever it is, you're also in the present moment, constantly reminding yourself that your desire is good because it's there for expansion, but you're not tied to the condition of getting it. You don't tie your happiness to an outcome, because you know that the happiness comes from within, the contentment comes from within, the virtue of being in love with life and yourself and being proud of yourself comes from within, and not from something that is expected from you to attain outside of yourself, whether it be from others expected of you or from yourself expected of you. And that is the beautiful lesson, in my opinion, that desire teaches us. Desire inherently isn't bad. In fact, desire is something that is very much needed to get us out of that place of stagnancy, to get the energy flowing, to get us envisioning things that we wouldn't envision without desire. We wouldn't think about going further, higher, grow bigger or better if there wasn't something like desire inside of us. So the longing, I feel like, is deeply human, and the attaining is the balance between being grateful for the now and in love with the now of life and what it has to offer, while also saying and doing and thinking and feeling how we think this desire can improve our life or the life of those around us. And with that said, I hope that this episode brought you some new perspectives on this topic. It was a pure joy to talk about it and see it in a new light. We're all on this same path together. To me personally, desire has been quite a huge topic in the last 3 months to sort of work with and work through and find that balance. And I believe by considering it a balance act between surrendering but also being active, it is a continuous, consistent practice, as everything else that we've talked about is a consistent and continuous practice, and a fascinating one at that. I do hope that this episode brought you some valuable new perceptions and perspectives on the topic of desire. And I do hope that everything you desire and that you want to attain and that makes up your dreams and your visions of your own life will be attained in the most beautiful way, in the most beautiful journey, with the most unexpected adventures and lessons in between, so that you get there and it happens for the highest good of yourself and all. And I send you with all my heart all the love and all the light I have to emanate out into this world. I see you, I understand you, and I love you very much. I thank you for the courage you bring to the table in listening to these episodes
So
or doing any other
reverently,
work
you are
on your
doing
self
all of
growth, on
humanity
self
a
reflection, on self discovery. Know that in doing so, you're shining your light so very brightly. You are doing all of humanity a immense service by figuring out the puzzle, the labyrinth that is yourself and your existence. In every new topic you tackle and in every new wound you reintegrate and you heal, you're becoming a wholer version of yourself, and in doing so, you're becoming a more whole soul that is able to nurture the light within and emanate this light out into the world, showing that there is a different way of dealing with emotions, with pain, and with abuses. I do sincerely hope that this episode was of some service to that same journey of healing, of integrating. All the love and all the light in the world to you, my beloved fellow healing, integrating onions.